Hi, and welcome back to Mesoamerica, another one of our online lectures here. Today we're going to look at the Aztecs. Basically, what we've been doing in this unit is we're looking at 5 different cultures. We started by briefly looking at the Olmec and Zapotec. Last time we looked at the Mayans. Today we're going to look at the Aztecs, and next time we will finish by looking at the Incas. The Incas really don't fit because they're not really in Mesoamerica, but yet we're going to study them in this unit anyway. So anyway, let's talk about the Aztecs. We're going to go to our one constructive response question that we have for this unit. It is pretty much the same as it's always been, and we're going to use these things to help answer it. So what we're going to learn here in this today is we're going to look at the environment, cities, language, writing, economy, government, religion, and achievements of the Aztec people. We're going to fill this out on our chart, so you should have your Mesoamerica chart out and ready to rock, so you can jot some things down under each one of those categories. So the question we're going to ask here today, and we're going to attempt to answer, is who were the Aztecs and what did they do? With the information that we will provide from your chart, we should have plenty in terms of specific details to help answer this question. Again, just like we did with the Mayans, if you have not seen Engineering an Empire on the Aztecs yet, watch it. It's a great foundation. It helps you visualize and see the Aztec people. I know my classes have likely already seen it, but if you have not seen it, certainly check it out. Find it on YouTube or find the DVD. All right, so we're going to start with environment of the Aztecs. And I want to point out here, again, this is Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica is southern Mexico, part of Guatemala, and the Yucatan Peninsula, which is right here. And right in the middle here, you have this area, which is where modern-day Mexico City is, but there are 5 lakes that we're going to briefly look at here, and within these 5 lakes are where we're going to find the heart of the Aztec Empire. And what you see here in green will eventually encompass the Aztec Empire. And they were an empire. They were conquerors who took over other lands under the rule of one person. So they truly do fit that definition of empire. So let's talk about their environment here. They are in the Valley of Mexico. The Valley of Mexico is 7,500 feet above sea level, and there's a lot of fertile soil there, so there's the opportunity for farming. But what really makes this interesting is there's 5 interconnected shallow lakes right here. And Lake Texcoco, being the biggest one right in the middle, is where most of this is going to be found. If you can kind of see my cursor, you can see Tenochtitlan here. This is going to be one of their main, well, it will be their main city, and it is the site of modern-day Mexico City today. And you can see it's not accessible by land, so that's going to be something that will factor into this story here eventually. But this gives you kind of a look at the environment of the Aztec people. In terms of cities, Tenochtitlan is the big one. That's their capital. That's their heart. It's essentially a floating city. It's an island. They added a bunch of floating islands around them called chinampas, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, which Peter Weller talked about in Engineering an Empire. Again, please see that video. But they also had a religious center outside of the city called Teotihuacan. So those are the 2 main cities that we're going to look at here from the Aztecs. But Tenochtitlan really was amazing. I mean, even when the Spanish showed up, they were in awe of what they saw here with these causeways, these bridges going into the city, these floating islands around here, these beautiful pyramids inside of the city. So Tenochtitlan itself is definitely one of the main achievements of the Aztec people. In terms of language and writing, they had pictographs or glyphs. It wasn't quite as good of a system as the Mayas had, so it's not a complete writing system that can communicate all things. I do have some images here showing you some of the Aztec symbols or pictograms. You can kind of see what some of those look like there on your own if you would like. But definitely not as advanced as some of the other cultures we have talked about. Their economy. Well, one of the biggest things for their economy is, like I said, they were conquerors. So they went out and conquered other people around the area. And when they did so, they demanded tribute from those that they conquered. Tribute is a peace money, it's like a tax. So if you go conquer people and you demand that they pay you, and that might be in food, it might be in gold, it might be in lots of different things, that's wealth coming into your city. That's wealth coming into your civilization. So that can definitely be a form of their economy. One of the main things they traded in their economy, though, was obsidian. Obsidian looks like this. It's a dark volcanic glass, and it can be very, very sharp. So you can shape this into all sorts of different things, whether it's jewelry, blades, knives, things like that. A very highly coveted item here in the Aztec Empire. As for government, they had created a triple alliance. What that means is they allied themselves with two tribes around the area, and this eventually absorbed into the Aztec Empire. So they allied themselves with the Texcoco tribe and the Tlacopan tribe, which were nearby. And again, they eventually were absorbed into the Aztec Empire. As terms of their government, they did have an emperor who ruled all. So there was an emperor at the top who had absolute power. And we're not going to look too closely here at the decline of the Aztecs. We're actually going to look more at that in our Age of Exploration unit in the spring, because when the Spanish show up, there's some major conflict that occurs between the Aztecs and the Spanish. But ultimately, the Aztec power weakens under Montezuma II, sometimes called Moctezuma. So there's a picture of him right here. But he's kind of the beginning of the end for the Aztec people, as they will be conquered by the Spanish. Religion, well, they're polytheistic. Much of the Mesoamerican cultures were polytheistic. They had over 1,000 different gods. And they had lots of different ways that they honored the gods or had offerings to the gods. They had dramas, which were like plays. Certainly, they sang a lot of songs and had a lot of ritualistic dances for the gods. But one of the most unique ones, and this really stands out in comparison to the Mayas, is they were far more into human sacrifice. And so they would sacrifice to the sun god. You'd see them cutting out the hearts. I mean, they literally believed that the sun would not rise again if they did not have these human sacrifices. Absolutely brutal. A lot of times they would capture people from other villages or other tribes, or use prisoners to use as sacrifice. And it was a pretty brutal event. You would have your heart ripped out with an obsidian blade, and then they would cut your head off, and it was pretty bad stuff. So both the Mayans and the Aztecs participated in this, but it was the Aztecs that used this to their sun god. Man, it would have been a sight to see. Achievements. We'll finish up here with the achievements. They had two main calendars, and the calendars were fairly accurate as well. But probably their most famous achievement, and it's really more a set of achievements, plural, is the city of Tenochtitlan. I mentioned this on the previous slide, but what they would do is they would make these chinampas. These chinampas were floating islands. They were about a football field in length, and what you would do is take a whole bunch of reeds and twigs and weave them into sort of a mat, and then cover them with several layers of mud. And by doing so, basically the reeds and the mud would float, and you had enough good soil on the top of that to grow several crops a year on it. So the chinampas could provide a lot of food in an area that was, mostly water. So you had access to more fertile soil to feed more people. So the chinampas were definitely an achievement. I mentioned the causeways. Causeways are bridges into the city, Here again, I'm going to stress if you would see engineering and empire on the Aztecs, they will show you both the causeways and the chinampas and show you how really difficult they were to build, but how much they absolutely helped the population and the city of Tenochtitlan survive and thrive. So the Aztecs were builders, and anybody who would have come into this area and seen it would have been amazed. Like I said, the Spanish, when they came in, were like, wow, this is really something. So these causeways and chinampas are just two examples of why Tenochtitlan really stood out. Certainly there were lots of pyramids and lots of buildings built within the city, some of which still exist, but modern day Mexico City, one of the largest cities on the planet, has been built right over the ruins. I mean, literally right over the ruins of Tenochtitlan. So there's cases where city workers are digging new ditches for pipes in Mexico City, and they'll find ancient ruins of some Aztec sites. So it's kind of sad that one culture's been replaced by another. Really, the Spanish-speaking Mexican people they exist because the Spanish came in and conquered the Aztecs. Again, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our Age of Exploration unit later in the spring. So that should do it for us. That should give us enough information to answer our question. Again, who were the Aztecs and what did they do? You could talk about the environment living at Lake Texcoco on this island at Tenochtitlan. You could talk about the lack of glyphs that they had, certainly that they traded obsidian, that they had an emperor at the top, and ultimately that they were builders of chinampas and causeways. So I think there's lots of good stuff here that we can use to answer this question. So that's going to do it for us here. Next time we're going to talk about the Incas, and we're going to wrap up our unit on Mesoamerica. We'll see you then.